Penn State football is on the board at wide receiver in the class of 2025 after the commitment of Lyrick Samuel. It's a good start, but there's still work to be done. And this is what the Nittany Lions need to do next.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Zach Seyko, bringing you all things Penn State Nittany Lions coverage. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets. Your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And it's a recruiting episode. We bring back Brian Smith, the recruiting expert for the Locked On Podcast Network. So since it's a recruiting episode, let's talk about job recruiting. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. You can keep up with Brian on X, formerly known as Twitter, for all his takes on a national perspective when it comes to football recruiting. Penn State lands a wide receiver commitment in the class of 2025. The first one, Lyrick Samuel. We're actually going to talk about that in the second segment, specifically Samuel's profile, background, and what they need to do at wide receiver to continue to bolster the position. But overall, the class of 2025 is starting to take shape. I mean, Brian, they got a quarterback. They got two running backs. They finally have a wide receiver. They have a few offensive linemen. They have all three linebacker spots filled. This is a good start, but it's shaping up to be kind of the similar tale of a Penn State recruiting class, at least over the past few seasons. Top 15 class, solid group. You might have a couple of prospects that really stand out above the rest, but everybody is very, very good. So they still need some headliner prospects in this class, but I think it's a good start. I mean, from your perspective, Brian, how are they doing?
I think it is a good start. The only concern is something you and I talked about maybe a month ago. Mm-hmm. They didn't get Zaire Mathis. He goes to Ohio State. It happens. That one hurts though, because you never have enough pass rushers. If they don't get Mathis, and I don't know the situation on the following young man, and they don't also get Maxwell Roy, who's another Philadelphia kid, ironically, that would be concerning because those are two probably top 100-ish players nationally, and you can never have enough defensive linemen in general. That is my concern. They don't have a true defensive lineman committed yet. We'll talk about another one here in a bit. And you also mentioned to me, hey, check out this kid, this receiver. There's a little bit better, in my opinion, receivers back east this year, but I really like Lyrick Samuel. I think he's super underrated, and he plays in New York. The guys like myself, who was just at Under Armour Atlanta, seeing all these players, the kids up north don't get the attention yet because those camps will be a little later when it's a little warmer. Mm-hmm. But that kid can play anywhere. He's really long. He's pretty twitchy. I think that's a national top 200 kid conservatively, probably top 100. If he lived in Atlanta, everybody would offer it. So if Penn State could get him early, that would behoove them to do so.
I mean, Penn State definitely has more of I can't say that they have more of an offensive focus here, but you mentioned defensive line. They have no defensive line commits in this class of 2025. Yeah. Defensive end, defensive tackles. Now, in 2024, they had, 6? Liam Andrews flips over from offensive line to defensive tackles, so they end up totaling 6. So it's not like that position doesn't have players to fill a void there, but it is a little bit concerning when you do have some top prospects in Pennsylvania and they end up, I understand if the recruiting battle's ongoing, but in the case of Mathis, he's already committed. So now you kind of have to put your eggs, not necessarily in all in one basket, but you have to hyper focus on other commits. And if you don't get them, then what? That player that comes to mind is Trent Wilson. Trent Wilson has Penn State high up on his board. Penn State has him high up on their board. This is a player that is that headliner prospect. If you're going to highlight anybody at this class and you say, what does Penn State need to do next? It is get a player like Trent Wilson. Get Trent Wilson in this class of 2025 because he can be the face of this group.
They need a defensive tackle that means something. They don't need numbers. They need a high upside guy that's also got a pretty high floor at least, and preferably both of those things in two. You want to get 2 D tackles in every class because that position takes a lot of attrition. And again, you got a kid in Philadelphia, Roy, and you got this kid right down the road in Maryland. Penn State does a tremendous job in Maryland.
Yeah.
If they could get those two after last year's haul, that's the kind of thing that, I'll just be honest, Georgia and Alabama do pretty much every year. That's why they're Georgia and Alabama. They just have more guys up front than you do, and they keep their snap counts low. And at the end of the year, they're not wore out like other schools are, and they do well in the playoffs. Got to have the D lineman to win a title, and that is Penn State's objective. So it's a small line, man. If you just get 1 or 2 more of those kids every year, your program's completely changed.
Yeah. And wide receiver is the obvious position, and we will focus on that more in the second segment because there's so many players that we could name specifically. And Penn State's offered north of 80 players for the class of 2025 in terms of wide receiver. That's a lot. That is a lot of players at one position. Yeah, exactly. It's just anybody and everybody. If you want to play wide receiver at Penn State, you just might have a chance. But there's quarterback. Bekim Kritza is a lot of high upside potential. Like I said, Penn State. This follows the theme of a traditional Penn State class. Top 15. You're not going to have this consensus 4 or 5 stars that headline the class, but players that ultimately, some of them could end up turning into consensus top 100 players, top 50 players. Penn State has always been get in on the elevator at the ground level and go all the way to the top floor with these prospects, and that's fine. That's the way that they have to recruit in this case, and we've seen it work for them. But they already have 2 running backs committed. They're trying to get a third. I don't know what that's going to do in the case of Tyke Hayes, Keandre Barker. They seem all invested into Penn State, but I do find it interesting that Penn State goes in with the objective to get 2 running backs, and now they're looking for a third. I know that they imagine Singleton and Allen are going to go off to the NFL, but usually 2 is good enough, but not in this case. They're targeting guys like Alvin Henderson. Henderson's really good at the top of their board. And if they can land a third, I just wonder what that does for the guys that are already committed currently.
I would imagine somebody wouldn't be committed that much longer. I spoke to Alvin last weekend. That's a great football player.
Yeah.
And he can go wherever, Miami, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Ole Miss, whatever he wants. So 3's too many in a class in today's world. Somebody's not going to sign. But if you added somebody like that, Alvin Henderson's a top 5 running back nationally. And for the record, he scored 61 rushing touchdowns last year. That would be okay if you're a Penn State fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's Jabri Wallace-Coleman. I don't want to forget about him. He was formerly committed to Georgia. He was formerly committed to the Bulldogs, but he goes to Imhotep Charter in the Philadelphia area. So Penn State's it's really down to Henderson and Wallace-Coleman. If you can get one of them, you really have a side. And then if you're able to retain all 3 running back commits for this class, I mean, you are set up perfectly.
Yeah, I don't know how you can afford 3 running backs in a class, but that also makes me wonder if one of their guys is going to decommit or somebody's going to transfer or something. They have that information. I do not. But 3 is a lot, even if you're going to get those kind of guys. I can't remember the last time somebody signed a class like that, but it's probably maybe Georgia. Mm-hmm. That would be my guess, but it's hard to get more than 2 backs in a class, my friend.
We've talked at length about quarterback, Matt Zollers, Malik Washington. Penn State wants to add a second one, but I think when you have Bekim Kritza, who has a lot of potential, you saw him play down in Florida, you at least have a quarterback in this class, but it would be nice to get the in-state prospect in Zollers, who is a high-end 4-star and has Penn State in his top schools, and then Malik Washington, same thing. Penn State's listed in his top schools as well, so you really can't go wrong. But this class is starting to take shape more offensively than defensively, but why... Well, let's focus on some wide receivers, Brian, going into the second segment, because Penn State still needs more of them. They've offered dozens of them, as we pointed out here. Who are some of those names you need to know that is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions? This episode is a recruiting episode, so let's talk about the leaders in job recruiting, and that is LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you the access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does that all while making the process easier and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates available. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses wear a lot of hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits to LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And the Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, and now you can find it in the free Fire TV channels app. You can keep up with Brian as well, following him on X, formerly known as Twitter, for a national perspective on high school football recruiting. And also check out his show, Locked On Florida State, Locked On Seminoles, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast as well. Penn State is on the board when it comes to wide receivers for the class of 2025. It feels like it's about time because Marcus Hagans is the wide receivers coach. He's also the director of the offensive recruiting side of it. Terry Smith does that on the defensive side, but Hagans is the leader when it comes to offensive recruiting. So that since this is your position, this is your forte, it is about time. I like this one a lot. For Samuel, people were asking me, is he, because he's from Brooklyn, New York, is he related to Curtis Samuel, who's from the same area, went to Ohio State? He is not. He is not. I just want to put that out there. But and no questions about Deebo Samuel, but he is not related to Deebo Samuel either. He is his own player. He's his own person, carving his own path in football. But for Samuel, I mean, this is, again, same thing, high upside potential. There are some things, some concerns maybe that you would look at in this kind of prospect, but you can't teach height, Brian. He's 6'3.5", 6'4" if we're splitting hairs, right? He's very tall. He's very fast. For someone who is 6'4" and runs the way that he hits a second gear that quickly, or the fifth gear. He's able to reach his top speed so quickly. So you have speed, you have agility, you have quickness for someone that you can't teach 6'4" height to. But there is the drawback to that. He's a little on the lighter side. Currently listed at 170, 175 pounds. Now, it's easy to add weight, but he's not your Megatron type of build, okay? But he is a speedster. Interestingly enough, who thinks of getting a 6'4" wide receiver, the football, on a bubble screen and letting him just work his magic with his footwork and get into the open space? I find that interesting, and there's still more in terms of potential. There's still much more improvement for him. So this is a 4-star according to On3, a 3-star according to Rivals. ESPN doesn't have him ranked. 24/7 also has him as a 3-star. So there's still a lot of learning to do just about Samuel in general coming out of the Brooklyn area.
I don't remember the last time I saw a 6'4" kid like him really go out of his way just to shake and bake people.
Yeah.
Like, he knows he can do it. And I'm guessing, being from where he's at, he played basketball. He had to have. He might even still play because Brooklyn is a big basketball city. But watching him play, it's not the greatest comp, but he does what he should, and that's dominate. He makes people look dumb on that film. I'm not saying he's Randy Moss, but they're built similar. Randy was 180, 185 pounds coming out of high school. this kid doesn't run 4.3 like Randy did, but he's really fast. There's no way he doesn't end up a 4-star recruit, in my opinion, even though he's from New York where it's harder to grade kids. Most of the good players just don't play football there. They play basketball. But, man, he's a good football player. Penn State could possibly, if they can get him up to 185, 190, he might play right away. They just don't have many guys like him.
And he can, again, this is a junior going into his senior season, right? We're looking forward in a sense. The class of 2024 kids, some of them enrolled early, just got onto campus, and we're already focusing on the next slate of recruits. I mean, I'm impressed because he's from New York, the state of New York. They were able to fend off Michigan State, Rutgers, Syracuse. We've talked a lot about Fran Brown and Syracuse on the show. I mean, it would have made perfect sense if he would have went and played for the Orange.
In a lot of ways, yeah, because I would assume that Fran's he's got to have contacts on both sides of the river.
Mm-hmm.
He called him. So this is important.
Right.
It's not a slam dunk that you're going to get receivers right now. No offense to Penn State, but their passing game has left much to be desired. Not that Syracuse has torn the world up either, but I would be surprised if he doesn't have SEC Big Ten schools coming after him later. He's really good.
Yeah, he can always add the weight. I mean, we've seen that.
Sure.
You and I have talked about how Tony Rojas came onto campus, added 29 pounds as an early enrollee one season ago. So the idea is to probably get Samuel to 200 pounds, and then he might even get taller. He might end up finishing with a build of 6'5", 200 pounds, and you can't teach speed. So Penn State knows how to balance this too. They're not going to add weight just to sacrifice other things. They're going to find a balance of it so you can have the speed complement the size as well. They're not going to compromise either of them.
Yeah, and I think he can play inside or out. Like he could play some slot for you, be a pain in the butt.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean he's pretty unique. To play that boundary spot on the side of the field where you're going to go up against a tough guy, needs to add the weight. Conservatively, though, this is a kid that's going to play flanker, and in some situations, I really do believe he can play slot. And when he doesn't get hands on him, that's why slot's such an advantage. It's hard to get press. After that first or second step, man, he is twitchy. He is really twitchy.
Penn State shouldn't be finished adding at wide receiver. Like I said, we've talked about how they've offered so many players at this position for the class of 2025. Marcus Hagans is really going all out to see what he can do to bolster the position. And there are plenty of other names that Penn State fans, Penn State spectators need to know. Cortez Mills has Penn State in his top 5. Lex Cyrus is a Pennsylvania name out of the Harrisburg area that probably at Penn State has the inside track on. He's more of your shifty slot receiver. So you have Samuel, who's very speedy and has the size, but projects more as a boundary. Someone like Cyrus projects more as a traditional slot wide receiver and would be a good addition. A name that's going to come up a lot and Penn State's going to have fierce competition for, but I want to throw this out there, Quincy Porter, because he, depending on where you look, he is across the board, consensus, the #1 player in New Jersey. That's Rivals, that's 24/7, that's ESPN, and that's On3. All of them say that this player is the best in the state of New Jersey, and he's a top 50 player, depending on where you look, and a top 10 wide receiver as well. But if Penn State can land a Quincy Porter type, that is, when we go back to the first segment, Brian, that is the headliner type of prospect that you want in your class. And it's good because just offense is the name of the game these days. Defense is important. I still believe that defense wins you championships, but offense, sometimes the best defense, Brian, is a better offense.
If you look at the playoffs, you don't score minimum 35 points and usually 40. How well does that work out?
In college, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pro football is a little different, but in college, man, they're ripping them apart. They're just ripping them apart. And I guess there's nothing you can do about it. You got to be able to throw the football. And I know Penn State, their staff knows that too. So you mentioned a little bit ago, 80 offers to receivers. I don't know how many of those are committable right now, but I would imagine at least 20 or 30 of them are. They got to have at least 4 receivers in this class, I would assume, that are really good, and some of them versatile in case you want to move somebody running back, DB, whatever. They need some big-time players, though. They need guys. And if somebody transfers out from the last class or whatever, is what it is. They got to have numbers again because they can't go through what they did the last couple of years in their passing game. They got to get some dudes.
I mean, Ohio State does it. Ohio State goes out and gets four or five wide receivers in a cycle like it's nothing when there's already a significant log jam at that position for them, but they continue to do it year in and year out. Penn State is trying to change that. Now, the way they've countered that is they recruit defensive backs really well. And when you have Terry Smith, when you have Anthony Poindexter, that's a lot easier. But now you finally have someone that has just always been a master recruiter, but has been at a smaller football institution. That's not to disrespect UVA, but there's levels to this, Brian. We know that Penn State is a better football institution than Virginia is, and Marcus Hagans probably doesn't like me, if he saw this show, would probably not like me saying that since that is his alma mater, and he coached there for a long time. But he obviously left there to go to Penn State for a better opportunity to do just this.
Do you blame him? Virginia's never going to win a title the way they spend money on facilities and coaches. That job's got a very, very low ceiling. So probably one of the 10 to 15 worst jobs in the Power 4 or 2 or whatever it is now. So it depends on who you ask. Yeah, I don't blame him for it. Now he's got to prove something, though, because last year was abysmal. They need better recruits, and they also got to develop some guys this spring and this summer, or kids that get committed will decommit this fall when they see them play and don't play well. This is a big deal. They got a lot ahead of them, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Penn State spring ball as it relates to receiver. They need to have some positive news, including letting the media actually film some of it. If they don't, it's not going to work, but we'll see what they do.
Yeah, there will be some limited practice availability. The spring game, of course, in April. Right now, all the talk and all the chatter. I have an episode about this, a couple of them actually, about winter workouts and how much stock you should put into them. So I encourage people to go check that one out. But I appreciate that, Brian. Yeah. And now I want to hear your thoughts on the class of 2026. It's never too early. We got to focus on this one, as there is a player that is from your area down in Florida. Dia Bell, top quarterback in the class of 2026. It's never too early to talk about them, but Penn State, he is visiting Penn State once again. Son of a former NBA player. Does Penn State have a legitimate shot here for a Florida native, a top quarterback like this, to land that kind of commitment in the class of 2026? We'll discuss on the other side of this break. Let's hear from another one of our sponsors on today's episode, and that is FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet simply wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players, all your favorite NBA teams with things like quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. You like all your bets, you have them all together. You can combine them into one parlay for boosted odds and boosted winnings. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Talking everything. We're talking recruiting, right? We're talking football, men's basketball, men's hockey, wrestling, you name it, is right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And in this final segment, and this one is on a T-ball stand for Brian, since he's been based out of Florida for so long. And Dia Bell, one of the top quarterback in Florida, the #2 quarterback in terms of the consensus industry for the class of 2026, Dia Bell. Dia Bell, very talented player, and Penn State has his attention, right? This is the son of a former NBA player, Raja Bell. I remember him playing for the Phoenix Suns. That's growing up. I remember watching a little bit of NBA basketball, and Raja Bell played for the Phoenix Suns for a long time and then switched around to some teams and whatnot. But his son, carving his own path, playing football, interestingly enough, was a starter as a sophomore at one of the best schools in the country, definitely best schools when it comes to football in Florida, but in the country. And now Penn State has had him for multiple visits here. Interesting that they've been able to, but we've talked about this, Brian. We have talked about this. We've told people, the everydayers know this on the show, that Penn State has been able to bring recruits from the state of Florida and get them to commit more often than not, because of just how years ago this wouldn't happen. But with James Franklin and the recruiting staff that they have a legitimate chance for any of these types of prospects.
Juwan Sider, you got the staff in general. Don't want to leave anybody out, but Sider kind of headlines it. He's a Fort Lauderdale area guy, Broward County, Miami, etc.
Yeah.
Dia goes to American Heritage. It's in Plantation, right on the edge of Fort Lauderdale, one of the most prominent programs in the United States. They've got kids all over the country, Ohio State, Florida State, wherever you want to say. They've got players everywhere.
Yeah.
This is their guy, and I know Coach Smith there well, very good players under his realm, and they got a young team, even as sophomores last year. They boat raced a few teams, and Dia's guy was dealing out the passes. They've got like 4 receivers that are national recruits, et cetera, et cetera. But they also have a schedule that is worthy of it. They fear nobody, and he's going to be prepared. So getting kids like him on campus, and he's a really mature young man that looks at things a little more worldly than a lot of South Florida kids because of his dad and all the success he had.
Sure. Yep.
I could see him leading. I actually talked to them about it a few weeks ago when I was in South Florida. Dia doesn't know where he's going to go, but his dad wants him to kind of start narrowing it down, and this is part of the process. They got to take visits, and his dad's got the money to send him wherever because he played in the NBA. Penn State's in a little better position than probably some think. Miami's going after him hard. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up there, but Penn State's in the mix, and that's all you can ask right now. So, but one of the best players in this class.
He's got dozens of offers from any school that you think of, but Penn State was one of the first schools to offer him, and that's obviously made an impression on him. I would say your top 3 are Miami of Florida, as you mentioned, the Gators, and then Penn State. Seriously, Penn State is kind of the outlier here. It's not USC, it's not Texas, it's not Alabama. It's Penn State in the battle for Dia Bell's commitment.
I think a lot of people in Florida are still surprised about it. I've had a few conversations on it.
Yeah.
Somebody you know and I know well, John Garcia and I talked about Penn State. We talked about Sider. But Penn State, it's just the effort that gets them to visit overall. Again, Sider headlines it, but the quarterback coach, everybody, the O-line coach, they all have to gang up and get kids like this because Dia can go anywhere. Yeah. You wouldn't even get him to take it 1 unofficial, let alone 2, unless he was truly interested.
He's Brian Smith, the Locked On Podcast Network recruiting expert. Thank you, Brian, so much again for the time, the perspective. You can keep up with him on X, formerly known as Twitter. You can also check out his show, Locked On Seminoles, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep up with Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts as well. Brian, thanks again as always, and can't wait for the next time we get to have this conversation.
Thank you much, sir. Have a good one.